I'm Joan Reed Olson. Sometimes you stumble on the end of a story, and it's so exciting you want to go back and find out something about the beginning. Well, that happened to us while we were filming the process of reproducing a glass pitcher from the first known glass factory in Canada. And that's why we're here, because that was a very exciting experience. We're here now at the Sigmund Samuel building, and that's part of the Royal Ontario Museum here in Toronto. And the person who can tell us about the original glass pitcher is Janet Houghton.
The Mallorytown pitcher was one of the first pieces of glass made in Canada, as far as we know. And it was made at Mallorytown, Ontario, which is about 40 miles east of Kingston on the St. Lawrence, or just a half-mile north of the St. Lawrence. The museum has a reproduction shop, and the ROM Reproduction Committee and Elizabeth McClelland decided that they would like to reproduce the Mallorytown pitcher to sell in the sales shop, and that was how that project began.
A year ago, I had been up on a country gallery tour with the McMichael Canadian Collection, and had been introduced to Jamie Sherman's studio. His studio is located just outside of Bracebridge, where there are a number of other types of studios, pottery, and there's a weaver and a cabinet maker and a porcelain lady. And this is where I felt, after meeting Jamie, was perhaps the person that would be able to do a suitable job for us at the museum.
Initially, my reaction to being asked to reproduce the Mallorytown pitcher was with a certain amount of caution, I guess you'd say. I had never attempted to make a piece of glass that more than two hands had originally made. In the old days, of course, would have taken 2 or 3 people working as a team to produce a pitcher like this, or many of the earlier blown pieces of glass. And so I knew right away that one problem I'd have to overcome would be to work it out so that I could do it myself with just 2 hands.
So often, I think, artists can be insulted by somebody asking them to do a reproduction. I was pleasantly surprised when I went to see Jamie. We had a lovely conversation, and I could tell by talking to him that he was a history buff. He's involved in a great many historical things up in the Bracebridge area.
I realized very quickly that the Bates pitcher, as it's known, it was certainly the one that spoke to me right away. It's a beautiful pitcher. It has a great lyricism to it, and right away I wanted to try to reproduce this pitcher. So the museum was kind enough to allow me to examine the pitcher very closely. It's very, very fragile, has been broken and very expertly glued together, and I was able to weigh the pitcher to get a sense of its weight and balance and so on. I sketched it, made measured drawings, and finally photographed it. And this is the material that I've used to work from in doing the reproduction. I asked them if they'd let me take it home, but they didn't think much of that idea.
I had explained to him that when one does a reproduction for the reproduction shop at the Royal Ontario Museum, it must be as close as possible to the authentic piece.
In my own work, you see, the glass composition has less soda ash in it, soda ash being one of the 3 ingredients necessary to make glass. The other 2 are sand and lime. And in the recycled glass that I use for my own art glass work, there's comparatively less amount of soda ash. I needed more soda ash in the batch to give the glass a greater elasticity. So when I started melting my own glass for this project, I found I had that elasticity. And that solved a lot of the early technical problems. And then there was the technical problem of the color in glass as well. And I experimented using a variety of oxides, and the early information about this pitcher suggested that the color, the unusual aquamarine color from Mallorytown, was the result of certain quartz rock available locally. And I was pretty sure that it had perhaps more to do with the iron oxide content of the sand. So I started with iron oxide, and that produced too green a color. And so I started adding some cobalt oxide, which produced too blue a color. And finally, with the addition of copper carbonate, found that the color came out almost exactly right into that aquamarine color. But it took 7 or 8 different attempts at batching this glass to get the color just right. The process of developing a reproduction, the first acceptable reproduction of the Mallorytown picture, took 14 weeks, or 14 and a half weeks. And I suppose I'm not by nature a note taker. I had to overcome that, I suppose, in myself to work on this reproduction. I like to work more intuitively, just sort of work by feel, but I found that there were so many variables, how the handle goes on, the number of windings, the weight of the piece, and so on, that repeated attempts produced too wide a variety of results. So I started taking notes, notes and notes and notes, and page after page after page of the technical data for the melt and the color. And then as I would make progress with the shape, I would try to lock that in and write notes to myself and pages of information to work from and gradually form a foundation. I would get the foot right. So then I would keep that information locked in and start to work up the piece until I got the belly of the piece right, and the lily pads, and so on. And eventually I got right to the top of the piece.
Well, of course, Jamie was very nervous bringing it down, and as you can imagine, there is a review committee made up of curators and all professional people from the museum who would be coming to this meeting to look at this and to criticize. He brought it in. He did not stay for the meeting, naturally, but he was really very nervous about it. And I think we all were, because he had said to us so many times, you know, you never make two pieces alike, and the color can vary so considerably from one piece to another, depending on how long it's in the oven. And so with all these sort of intangibles, it was really it was an exciting moment, but a very unnerving period for him.
The word came back to me after I sent the first couple of copies down that the handle could be a little lower and the belly could be a little broader and that sort of thing. So I was disappointed, but I realized, of course, they were right. So back to the drawing board, and I brought the profile of the handle down a little bit and made the whole piece more of a squat shape, as the original is.
So he came back, and I guess about a month later, came back with his second piece. And that was won over unanimously by the review committee. And so from there we went into production.
I began by taking